Hi, Pranab. Thanks for joining me, friend.
Hey, Tasshin. Good to be here.
I'm really delighted to have you. You're an old friend at this point, and you're actually one of the first people to host me on my pilgrimage. And yeah, I've just been such a constant Dharma companion through that time, and really good friend. And feels like we get to keep crossing paths on this continent. And I'm always delighted when I see you. And uh, I don't even know how to put words to it, but I think very highly of you. I see your gifts and your wisdom and your strength and your skills in this world, and that's something I really value. Someone who has, as they used to say at Maple, wisdom, love, and power. I really think you have all three of those qualities, and I admire them. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you are younger than me, but actually, you feel much older than me. You feel like an older brother to me, and that feels very sweet. Something I'm grateful for, and so it's a pleasure and a privilege to have you here. Um,
It means a lot. Thank you, man.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I treasure all the memories we had, especially that like about a month I think that you lived with me at
Mm-hmm.
my parents' house
Uh
in
huh.
2021.
Yeah, the fall of 2021.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. That was good.
Um, so I'd love to start by hearing about you and your life so far, and how you see it, how you see what's happened to you, how you understand who you are and who you're becoming, and what's happened so far. So part of that is facts, of course, of, oh, I was born here, or these were my parents, or, such and such school, whatever. That's all fine. But the thing I'm really trying to sense when I hear these things is how someone sees themselves, how they think about themselves, how they think about the events that have formed them. And that creates a context or a frame in which I can see the details more clearly of, like, oh, there's specific things I'm interested in. Like, I've been really admiring the work you've been doing these days with your business, and I'm excited to talk about that, uh, and other particulars that we are both interested in. But just hearing where you're coming from and who you are and how you sense who you are, that's something I'm really holding precious in my heart and listening for when I hear someone's story. And that said, there's also no pressure. It doesn't matter how you answer. It can be short or long, this way or that way. I'd love to hear whatever you'd like to share about your story so far.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a preference against, or I shouldn't say preference. I think I have a pattern where I tend to not like long monologues. I'm like, no, I'm only a dialogue person. So I've thought about this. I prepared for this a little bit to make sure I don't that I feel satisfied with the way I approach this. Yeah, I think there are a few threads. There's a thread of sort of friendship, authenticity, worldview, um, career things, family things. So I think as I weave through life story, it'll touch on a few of those. I was born in India, but about a year later moved to Canada with my family, and then grew up in South Carolina at the age of 7. So and then I graduated high school in South Carolina. So that surprises a lot of people, especially the people that I think we know around Twitter and the sort of, um, I think there's a lot of buzz around San Francisco and New York and just sort of like the amount that I think you and I both can travel and see the world and see things and just with that frame, I think it's interesting that yeah, growing up, I just never really, I never, it was really not, this is all like, I think the me as a kid would have sort of couldn't have imagined the kind of life that I live now or the sort of, the friends that I have or the things that I do and the way I see the world. Yeah, as a kid, I was really shy. So I didn't have very many friends. I was a really kind of quiet kid and pretty reserved, uh, from probably 3 or 4 to the age of eighth grade, something like that. So 13, 14. Um, I was a pretty smart kid. I skipped a grade in school, and I think my parents said I could have skipped two, but I skipped like first grade in Canada, and it never really was a big part of my identity. But I think things came. I think I was always sort of a overthinker as a kid. I think I kind of like was often kind of in my head, quiet, and just sort of took to myself. I went online at a pretty early age. I think from second or third grade. I think when moving to South Carolina, I've spent a lot of time online. Um, and yeah, just didn't have it. I didn't really hang out with a ton of people, maybe like one friend here or there. But I think everyone would sort of say I was pretty quiet and reserved. Um, that really shifted in seventh or eighth grade. I had a few more friends in middle school, but then I think around seventh or eighth grade, I really sort of felt more myself. I think I often felt that I had sort of a me at home and a me at school that felt like two separate people. Uh, I may have even code switched a bit. Like at home, I would have a bit more of an accent or something, and at school, I would just be fully myself, or more the fullest of myself in some ways. But even then, quiet. And then, yeah, I would say through eighth grade on, I don't know if I read or remember reading of or something, but I think the Dale Carnegie "How to Win Friends and Influence People" thing. It's so funny because at this point, it's not even a memory, but a memory of a memory. It's like I think I read that. I don't know, but like something about that shifted. Um, I also read Siddhartha in the summer of eighth grade, and that really shifted things, which will tie into sort of the wisdom spiritual aspect. But yeah, at some point, I think like in effect, I sort of from eighth grade onward just became a lot more social, a lot more myself. I think my parents would even say I like really hit my vibrancy there. And that's a whole thread that I haven't really talked about or wrote about, but I think it was a pretty big transformation that, yeah, I just kind of became the Pranab that I am now from sort of learning how to ask questions, be curious about people. I really got interested in what people had to say, what they were interested in, all their interests. I learned that I could just be friends with most people by asking them about themselves and learning about their things and just being curious. And that skill has sort of continued to ramp and grow through college and now. And then since then, I've had phases of sort of outwardness of being sort of with a bunch of people, meeting them and sort of inwardness and like learning myself more and becoming more me. And that sort of leads to another round of openness where I meet other people that are closer to who I am and all that. So that's one whole thread that I had through childhood and beyond around friendship and myself. I think, hmm, yeah, as it comes to, I think my interests in, yeah, let's go with like Dharma spirituality stuff. I think from an early age, I remember like going to bed, sort of contemplating death as a way to go to sleep or something. I think I just like I was like an insomniac for like many years. I've just been like hours just sort of like in bed trying to go to sleep as a kid. Uh, and that was a thing that I did that I think was weird probably. But then, yeah, summer of eighth grade, I read the book Siddhartha, and that sort of was the first like remembrance of a time I had a shift from a book, just something that was like, whoa, that's cool. Um, I don't know what I made of it then, but yeah, I think it was good. And then throughout high school, I got really into personal development, self help type stuff, mostly especially as it relates to friendship around like um, confidence and talking to people. There's a YouTube channel I liked a lot that I don't think it exists anymore from this like Nordic guy called Comfort Zone Crusher, and he just did these like comfort zone challenges. I remember Simple Pickup was like a challenge, like it was like a popular channel back when I was in high school. Uh, where people would like pick up girls, and it wasn't ever about the girls thing. It was just about like talking to strangers. I thought was really funny. And yeah, I remember in like 10th grade, I think my friends and we were like, let's go to the mall and like talk to people. We did that a couple times. And it was really funny because I remember the feelings of just like I would sort of like warm up by talking to just some like guy at the GameStop or something, and then I just remember like going up to him and just feeling like so much panic, so much like anxiety. I'm just like, ah, what do I say? And then just something, hey, you have any favorite video games or something? Or something just kind of funny, and then just feeling like this huge relief or euphoria after, just like, whoa, that was cool, and then sort of doing that, and my friends would all do that. Maybe just a handful of times, but it really did help, and that sort of that skill I think has became really helpful for me over time. But that sort of I think this that was sort of the start of a thread of bringing sort of you can call that relational practice, I guess, but it was really in my mind just like I was not confident. I wanted to have like rejection therapy or just face my fears and just talk to people and grow, and that was great. Um, and then yeah, so that was a whole thing. And I got really into another YouTube channel I liked a lot then was actualized.org. This guy Leo Gura, who I sort of have I have quite a few reservations over, but I think was pretty helpful for me then. And I say I sort of got spiritually radicalized by the YouTube algorithm at the age of 14, of just like, learning about various personal development and eventually like meditative concepts. And yeah, yeah. So that was all high school. I think things get way more interesting in college. Yeah. Oh, and I guess yeah. And then in college, so I moved to Texas. I went to UT Austin. My dad had started a business when I was in high school that allowed me to go to Texas, and that really changed things because um, tech from like Texas to South Carolina was like actually way more sort of cosmopolitan. I remember walking through visiting the campus and just hearing like five languages in a minute or something, just walking through the between the um, like classrooms or something, and then that just blew my mind. I think it was really cool to see just like all these different cultures, all these different people. I remember my freshman year, and I came in not knowing a single person. I had a friend through this like Facebook survey that became my roommate, and I met a bunch of his friends who were from Dallas, and um, I remember, yeah, using those social skills and sort of talking to pretty much every person to the left and right of me in all my classes that first year for the most part. And that led me to just sort of meet tons and tons of people. And I always found people interesting. Um, yeah, I think it's funny. My two like special interests in life are probably people and Dharma. I think that sort of clocks and in some ways has clocked since then. Um, and yeah, yeah, just that was a whole thread. Like, and I continued to like become myself through that. Yeah, so it's the friendship piece, and then through college, I sort of meditated more, but nothing didn't really change. Then things really accelerated through the end of college. I think like from the end of college through now was sort of like the largest sort of continual step on the gas in my life. It has kept continued to press on the gas. So yeah, I think things really shifted. So I went to college for chemical engineering. I probably in the middle or end of that program. Um, I mean, throughout that entire time, I was reading internet blogs. In some ways, like while I had all these friends and felt very connected. I think I fundamentally felt like not too many people truly understood me, and I sort of had a lot of interests through just like reading blogs. I think I read your blog probably back in the day, maybe 2016 or 2017, maybe. Yeah, I think actually, yeah, I think it was around that, maybe
I
2018.
wouldn't have had a blog until 2018 or 2019.
That it was at least 2018, 2019.
Mm.
Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
I definitely knew of you then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, and then yeah, I would say yeah, things really shifted. I think when going from chemical engineering into tech, I sort of like figured out how to break into SF and get a job there. And it was a year of sort of like self learning, running life experiments, and messaging people on LinkedIn, and eventually sort of messaged a guy who's not one of my best friends, but he sort of took a chance on me, referred me to his company, and then I like worked really hard and sort of passed the interview and got in. This company called Samsara, funny enough. And then when I moved to San Francisco, uh, that's when things really accelerated. So that was the year I sort of got more into um, deeper end meditation. This is 2019, deeper into longer sits, um, thinking about sort of psychedelics and psychedelic therapy for mental health benefits and meditation benefits and the neuroscience of all that. Um, true Dharma for the first time, really. I think until that point, it was all mostly just meditation and some like self help and self improvement stuff. I think Dharma really, as a sort of concept and as a thing in my life, really took off then. Um, yeah, some family challenges started to really kind of come to a like get worse in 2019 in a way that really accelerated my own practice. Um, yeah, and just I met Michael Taft, who's my primary meditation teacher. Um, and then that really took off. And then in 2020, COVID happened. I got on Twitter, uh, and then I would say like in the every year since then, it's just been faster than the last in terms of acceleration of growth and change. So yeah, I think like sort of it's not going to do as much justice, but it almost feels like I need to just kind of breeze past it. Not breeze past it, but just kind of condense it. Yeah, and since then, I think it's just been like a whirlwind of just lots of growth through Dharma, learning who I am, becoming myself. Um, I think I've become more myself every year, and that's been interesting. I think ways I've seen that, like I even noticed sort of in the way I hold myself and the way I speak. I think even in high school, I remember sort of walking into class and having kind of a really shallow voice and it'd be kind of up here. And I would see one of my good friends, Chris, and I'd be like, "Oh, hey, Chris," and then I'd sort of like drop and relax and that kind of thing. I felt so dependent on other people and environments. Um, and I remember like working some of my first internships in chemical engineering, and I felt really tired, and I felt I held a lot of tension in my face, and I felt kind of tight. Then as it got marginally better, but I think as I changed environments into I had a different internship at this like tech forward bank, and I felt much more myself there. When I had my first job in San Francisco, I felt way more myself. Like I could actually talk to the people there. As my coworkers were truly more my friends. And now, like I fast forward to now, the work I do is just like there's really no difference between my work self and the me self and the me at home. And I just feel way more congruent and sort of more coherent in all parts of my life, which feels awesome. Like it's something I couldn't have even really imagined a few years ago. I'm sure there's way more to go. But yeah, that all feels pretty cool. And yeah, and I think just now Dharma is one of the most important things. I tend to have, I think I'm kind of losing the context, losing the thread. But yeah, just fast forwarding, I think, yeah, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, from 2020 to now, there was a bunch of stuff around like job changes, working through family challenges. Um, could you ask me a question? I think that would help me sort of refocus. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I find myself really curious about is what you said about the shift from meditation and self help to, oh, it's Dharma and
Mm.
Dharma being part of your life. And I wonder how you would explain to your past self, like your eighth grade self, your 14-year-old self, like what the distinction is between just trying to improve yourself or trying to meditate some and Dharma.
That's a really good question. In some ways, I really do think that the me from then did have glimpses of this. They just were really not that integrated. But I do have some strong. It almost is faith because it's not a true knowing, but it's some faith or even a vague knowing or something that I think that the me now I like saying the story that like in some ways I was like just as wise in some ways as a kid as I am now. I just sort of was like that was like 0.01%, maybe like in terms of depth of wisdom and continuity of wisdom. The depth was like definitely not as high, but it was like maybe like half or something. But the continuity was like 0.001% of what it is now or something. I don't know. But I like to think that I was a pretty like I think I probably would have I think I would have loved I would have truly loved to talk to as a kid, like me now, or like an older version of me, because I think I just didn't really have any central figures I could strongly look up to or have as role models. And this is a just separate bit of a separate question, but it's sort of sparking this. I think I often felt like I felt very self reliant and very sort of like me, and strongly like it was about me to like push things forward. It was about me to sort of make things happen, and lead my life. And I think the biggest difference, which would be hard to transmit, is sort of just like sort of just like some insight around no self or some insight around like actually the self was constructed and that actually means you can relax a lot. And I think that's the main difference. That doesn't really sort of account for theory of mind. That I don't think that like that immediately would have landed. I think for a younger version of me, but something like Yeah, I think Dharma is about like becoming who you are and have always been. Um, and it's about sort of revealing more than creating and building. So I think just like the whole thing of like, oh, there's more to learn, more to improve. I don't think I ever held it as tightly as sort of like productivity gurus sort of emphasized or kind of like the peak of hustle culture did, but it definitely was there, and it still kind of is something like that. But I think like it's mostly just sort of emphasizing it's about just revealing and becoming who you already are. And that might come through growing and changing and learning and doing all these things. It's not like you don't have to do anything differently, but the way you approach it, the way you this it's sort of it's not coming from a deficit. It's coming from there's a whole like beingness to it. I was also really interested I was like really into wisdom from like a young age, like from like eighth grade or something. Like it was all about wisdom for me. But I think another part of Dharma, I think deeply emphasizing compassion. And I think the compassion wing didn't really hit me until 2017, 2018, and then didn't really sort of land until 2020 or 2021 after some of the retreats of that year. But I think just feeling compassion as just like, hey, compassion is really, really important. I think wisdom and compassion, that's what makes it, to me, Dharma more than just self improvement and meditation.
How would you explain to your past self what wisdom and compassion are?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think so wisdom, I think as it stands, I think both are getting closer to the truth. I think I used to say just wisdom was getting closer to the truth, but I also now think compassion is getting closer to the truth. So for wisdom, the way that shows up is it's about I think multi perspectival thinking, like being able to see a thing from different angles, insight, sort of seeing the thing that sort of when there's a dilemma of two things kind of that feel like an either or, the third way or the middle path that kind of transcends that. Um, I think the frame that I had as a kid was I often wanted to read books that would sort of shatter my worldview. Like I really sort of enjoyed, some weird way the feeling of having my worldview sort of shifted and changed and altered through the landscape of my mind changing. Um, I think at the time that was like wait but why blogs would do that. Tim Urban stuff would just be like very mind blowing to me and sort of like mind candy in that way. Not mind candy, it felt more nutritious than that. But then I think after that, there was other books like Man's Search for Meaning, and then so that the way back was one of those. And Dharma books have always sort of like consistently led to that sort of thing of just being like, whoa, there's some truth here. There's a feeling of truth. There's a feeling of wisdom to it. Of just like, oh yeah, there's some eternality, some sense of like timelessness, some sense of like practical usefulness too. There's like it was like pragmatic truth. There's like there's ultimate, but also there's meeting this truth that meets you where you're at, and they can be both. And I think that's wisdom. Since then, I've sort of taken on Buddhist scaffolding for a lot of that, like upaya, and like, oh yeah, all these concepts are there, they're great, But I think the sort of the building blocks of that were probably something salient to me as a kid. Um, yeah, yeah. Did that answer your question? I think so.
If you had to answer again, but just very simply, how would you say what Dharma, wisdom, and compassion are?
Mm. Dharma is about right view and recognition. Sort of, it's about seeing what is and how things are and how you want to be in relation to those things. Wisdom is sort of the wisdom and compassion are the two components of that. Wisdom is sort of seeing the angles, the insights, the perspectives, the sort of the mind component of all that, the trappings and everything. And compassion is sort of the courage, the strength, the heart, sort of the sort of understanding in a more heartfelt way, sort of a meeting empathetically um, of all that. That doesn't feel fully satisfying, but I think that's the best I got for now.
Hmm. It's beautiful to me. Uh, what happened in 2021 or so that helped you to connect to compassion, or rather, what was it like to connect to compassion and have that come online?
Hmm.
Not so much the circumstances, but more the experience of it. Although, feel free to speak to the circumstances, of course.
Yep. Yeah, there was a retreat that we did together. Actually, there were two things, two distinct moments in 2021. Yeah, I think I just had a distinct experience that was just like deeply, profoundly, just like, oh wow, compassion matters, wisdom matters, love matters. It's like I just had just there was just so many things that I think that I just didn't account for it. I didn't really sort of uh emphasize, but yeah, it was an experience in May of 2021 with MDMA that sort of just really just like blew my mind and just sort of like really showed me that I was like, oh my gosh, I've just been so undercounting this whole aspect of my life. It was just transformative. It was crazy. It was so cool. And I was just in my room by myself, just thinking about my friends and journaling. And yeah, I was sort of on the, I was like kind of thinking, do you want to talk about it? I was like, oh, I have a Twitter thread about this. Yeah, it's fine. I think it's really
I'm
cool.
smiling because I had my own very significant MDMA journey the same, literally the same month, May of 2021. So
Yes, I think you had the post about it, right?
yeah,
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 yeah. I think I remember remarking about the timing aspect
uh
of
huh,
that. I think when reading your post. Yeah,
uh huh.
no, for sure, for sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, yeah, it's just crazy how like it's just um there's just so much there. And it was such an aspect of my life that I just really didn't like think about or account for or emphasize. And it's so funny because in 2019 I took a class with Dr. Kristen Neff on mindful self-compassion. It was my last semester of school, and it was one of the most it was profound. It was
You
great.
took
It was
it
a
with
really good
her.
class. I took it with her. Yeah, she was the professor.
Incredible,
Yeah,
incredible.
and it's funny because I think like I took it with a few friends, and like they didn't really get it at all. And I
Hmm.
was like, this is awesome. But then like most of the class just took it sort of because it was an easy A.
Hmm.
And and I thought like, well, I really like this. And it's so funny how that class has become like in some ways the basis of my entire life and like
Uh
my
huh.
vocation more than like the rest of my degree.
Uh
It
huh.
was like 140 credit hours or whatever. Um, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, she's great.
Hmm.
And that was the first time I did like 30 minutes. It's funny because like that was the first time I really like felt into the importance of compassion and everything. And you just kind of forget. I think that's the nature of these good things. You just kind of easily forget. They're anti-memetic in some weird way. Experience. It's like you can remember them, and the experience is awesome, but then like ex- the memory of it is awesome, but then experientially, it just never really. It doesn't immediately just land and take, and that's sort of the kind of the fundamental problem, you know.
Hmm.
Well, one could see it as a problem, but also sort of the fundamental quest for the challenge,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what all of life's about.
I read a book by Sharon Salzberg on loving kindness in probably 2010, and like probably
Mhm.
nodded real vigorously at it, and then actually practiced that like more almost a decade later. So, I was like, yeah, love is good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was me from 2019 to 2021, and then 2021, I was like, oh, and then we had a retreat later that year that was very profound, sort of a loving kindness retreat with awareness practice that I did, and then I think, yeah, that just really shifted things. And I think the relationship between love and emptiness, and that's when I really got into the teachings of Rob Burbea.
Hmm.
And Rob's been sort of like probably one of the most impactful teachers that I've had in my life, though I've never met him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's also when I started doing a lot of IFS, internal family systems work, and sort of adjacent somatic imaginal work with our friend now Theo on Twitter.
Hmm.
That was a huge thing. But yeah, 2021 really kicked off a lot of that. So like it was the meta practice, Rob Bea. It was the first time I really did retreat, did a lot, started doing a lot more IFS, learned about it the year prior. And all of those just like really, really emphasize like love, compassion, Dharma, and things just took off
Hmm.
in many ways.
Hmm. So part of it was an MDMA journey, part of it was doing emptiness practice, part of it was doing IFS, and all of those contexts kind of helped crystallize and connect to in a really deep embodied way something that you had practiced before and encountered before, but it kind of made it more vivid and real in a lived sense.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yep. Very experientially. Yeah, I think like I hadn't felt emotions below my shoulders very much, or below my
Hmm.
like upper chest. And that
Hmm.
was the year I started to really start feeling it here and below.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and now it's almost like, yeah, through my belly and
Hmm.
now the edge is sort of on the sacral chakra area and
Hmm.
stuff. But it's really anyways, but that's for later. But yeah, that was when things really started kind of getting more embodied and um feeling into stuff.
You've mentioned a number of different teachers and practices and traditions, and um, you were born in India and you've encountered Buddhism, and you've really encountered such a breadth of teachings from so many teachers and so many practices. And I wonder at this juncture that we find ourselves having this conversation, how you think about all that and relate all of that, and make sense of yourself as a practitioner, or which traditions or practices are native to you. I feel like this is a question so many of us wrestle with in modern practice, where it's a valid path to just be like, I am this tradition, this is all I do, this is it. But I think you and I are both sort of uh, spiritually polyamorous, as Shinzen would say. And he has a
Does
good
he say
post
that?
about that from a decade ago about being spiritually monogamous or spiritually polyamorous. And
Did Shinzen Young have that post?
he does.
Oh,
It's an
that's
oldie
awesome.
but a
That's so
goodie.
funny.
Yeah,
That's so funny. That's
yeah.
awesome.
But I'm
I'd love
curious how
to.
you think about it.
Yeah. But meaning to. Anyways, there's a thing there. Yeah. So I think I love this question because I think yeah, core to my personality is sort of always being an indexer or sort of a generalizer. I think yeah, like it's so funny. In some ways, like I think the best analogy is GPT. It's before GPT was a thing, GPT-3 and all that was like, oh, I just always wanted to sort of index knowledge and be like, oh, like have the table of contents for all the table of contents and kind of know where things are and what's this thing do and what's that thing do. And in college that showed up as sort of like trying to know what are possible careers you could do in this major and very basic stuff, right? But like always sort of trying to index knowledge and like little like cache little bits of reference and things like that. And that really like I think like that skill like for a while I thought it was useless. I was like, well, I don't actually know that much about anything, but I know a lot about a little. I know a little about a lot of stuff. But that really is sort of kind of taken to a T for Dharma things from 2019. Like diving in, I didn't know like Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. There's all this. What? It felt like I had to get a degree or like had to like self learn to do all this stuff. And y- yeah, it was I just sort of took it all like a sponge and I think just like tried a bunch of different practices from a bunch of different teachers. Um, and yeah, as it comes to now, I think yeah, having a meta systematic approach to practice, having a um, sort of fluid, sort of seeing these various systems. There's early Buddhism, there's middle Buddhism, later Buddhism, and seeing like the people that can kind of weave between them and around them, and not really be in any of them, but sort of like take from and still have sort of a point of view. That's my sort of favorite Dharma approach. Um, yeah, and I think thankfully we have sort of the culture and sort of people around that can support that. Like in 2019, I think that was very rare. That was still
Hmm.
quite rare.
Hmm.
When I went to San Francisco and met Michael Taft, and he was teaching at San Francisco Dharma Collective at the time. Tucker Peck was there. Katie Maney was there. That was like the place where I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Because I think before that, I was sort of window shopping at various meditation centers, and none had that feel. They were all a little bit dogmatic or a little bit sort of myopic in their view. Like this is the way, this is how we do things, and it was just so refreshing to be like, well, here's what we do, here's what they do, and it just, I was like, oh my goodness, it's amazing. And I think we're in the golden age of that, where there's so much information in a way that like even 6 years ago wasn't a thing
Hmm.
to the extent that it is now. So
Am I recalling correctly that you did a bunch of volunteer work for the San Francisco Dharma Collective back in the day?
I did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, this is why like I'm just like, if I were to like redo this whole podcast, I'm just like, oh man, there's so much stuff. There's so many threads that I wish I kind of like
Well,
start.
feel free to add anything you like, brother.
Right, right, right.
I'll
But yeah,
be
I think
here.
thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, like there's like oh there's a whole like self-education autodidact thread. There's like the whole like volunteering. Anyways, uh, yeah,
Hmm.
but yeah, yeah, I did a lot of volunteering for SFDC back in starting 2020. So like when COVID hit, I started volunteering for them, and that's how I really sort of got more involved with the organization and the teachers there. I would record a lot of what was it? Yeah, I think at first was so Michael Taft had streams on Thursday nights, so I would sort of um, paste the donation link and just sort of monitor the stream and help people like for like 2 years. I would just show up every single Thursday and like post a donation link or something like that, and then like help answer tech questions. And I was a mod of the Discord for a little bit with other people, and just kind of help answer questions and support. And did that for a couple of the like one of the other teachers, helped with some of the random marketing things for SFDC, and when Katie and Michael decided to start Alembic, I was also volunteering for that online as well. And I helped record a lot of the talks that Kelly Boyce did. She did a lot of yoga nidra, non-sleep deep breath meditations, lots of the various tech and marketing-ish things there, um, which was cool. So yeah, that really helped me sort of like I showed up every week, and I started being tech support and admin support for a lot of Michael Taft's courses. So I kind of got a lot of exposure to like the way he teaches things and the way he learns, or wait, yeah, the way he teaches and his approach to things, which I identify with quite closely.
Hmm. Hmm. What makes you feel called to a particular practice or a particular teaching or a particular community?
Yeah, I think it's like the juice. Basically, it's like if it's got like a feeling, if it's got sauce to it, you know what I mean? If it's got a
For those that don't know, Pranab is an incredible cook, so of course a
oh,
cooking metaphor would come to come to the surface here.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank
We
you.
should just be talking about food. I know Dharma's okay and all the rest of it, but I should just be hearing about food and salivating.
I've got some chicken marinating
Uh,
after to make after this call, so
uh,
I'm excited. Yeah, no, I think I think since like 2019, I think seeing stuff that had a sense of yeah, you can just tell when something has right view. There's sort of like a internal compass. I think everyone has this. I think everyone has an internal compass of like what their version of right view is for them. I do sort of have a sort of opinionated sense on like global right view in some sense as aligned to kind of my understanding of the Dharma and things like that. But in general, I think everyone has sort of a sense of what's salient, what has insight for them that meets them where they're at. And for me, I think just like teachers that have sort of met me where I'm like, oh wow, this there's a wow to here. There's not it's not rote. It doesn't if I were to break it down, it like has a freshness to it. It's got sort of a sense of like it passes the smell test. I'm like, I don't have as many intellectual objections to it. They could answer the intellectual objections I do have, and I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting. Um, like for example, I went to a Zen center and I listened to the Dharma talks there for a little bit, and I thought, nah, these are all a little boring. Like, it just doesn't really. And then there's sort of the advice of, well, just if you're bored, be with the boredom, and that's the mindfulness practice. And I think while that's useful, I want to just go to talks where the insights are just like hitting me every single time. And I think Rob Burbea had that for sure. I've listened to hundreds of his talks, at least 200, at least 150, something like that. Not to misrepresent, but I think like almost all the talks just had such a high hit rate of just being like, whoa, wow, oh man. Same with the Art of Accomplishment podcast. I think Joe Hudson and Brett Kistler's thing has like it's like huge hit rate of just like insight. And it doesn't have to be new. It doesn't have to be like some brand new novel thing. It's not an intellectual thing, but it has to be coming from sort of like Dharma from the source. And that's there's a sense of ever present freshness to that. Um, yeah, so it's a felt sense. It's a really felt sense of some insight or knowing or understanding.
hmm. 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 How have you watched yourself grow over these years as you kind of take stock of everything you've said? What
Hmm.
what what's the kind of person that you've become? What are the qualities and virtues that you've cultivated?
Mm, yeah. Yeah, so I think a simple frame for this almost comes from shamatha practice. So in shamatha, I think a way to sort of notice the depth of your samadhi or the depth of your collectedness is continuity and depth. So I think similarly for wisdom and sort of my growth, I think the depth has always sort of been there to some extent, but it's gotten deeper and deeper, which has been awesome. I think that's what listening to these talks, that's like it gets deeper and deeper. More importantly, that I've sort of seen the continuity throughout like my day, throughout my week, has sort of just like really grown. I think like let's say in 2019 or 2020, I was maybe at let's say I was roughly around the same depth, but I had maybe like 1 or 2% of that depth at that level throughout my whole week. And I think now maybe that's at like 30%. I don't know, maybe 30%, and maybe at like 80% of that depth, it's at like 50% or something, and that was not the case before. Um, and yeah, I just feel much more sort of like coming from more myself more of the time because I think most of my life I've sort of it just had this veil of sort of thick sort of like ignorance is one thing that comes up, but just kind of like comfort and numbing. Like I've sort of numbed myself to life a lot. I resonate a lot with the Enneagram system, and I think Enneagram 9 really sort of tracks with a lot of my um, personality structure. And there's a sense of just kind of like it can be really easy for me to like forget who I am and forget what I care about and just sort of like just like fade into the background and just not really be there as much and just kind of go with the flow in a really chill way. Um, yeah, so I think if anything, growth has sort of been like, oh, like again and again, faster and faster timescales, like remembering who I am, what I'm here for, what do I care about. And that still continues to be my most challenging thing. It's gotten way better over the years. It's way better, but it still continues to be the thing that I'm sort of working through and working with. Um, but I would say that's sort of the main through line of growth of just like showing up, sort of like just like presenting like confronting the hard thing, not avoiding stuff, just being myself in more situations, just like having courage, not suppressing, like all that sort of stuff. It feels like one big through line to me for all this.
I'm not sure I have words for it readily available, but I sense that over the 5 years or so that I've known you, I've seen a real growth as well as just talking to you. Your energy feels, um, and of course, I've changed as well, so it's hard to say. But it's always a dynamic. But I feel like yeah, you had so much wisdom and compassion and power already then, but you were kind of like cloaking it or hiding it or like second guessing yourself or like uncertain and kind of like tripping over yourself a little bit, like, oh, do I know, not quite. You were very graceful and very kind always, like it was never, but just like the attitude that you had towards it was a little bit like, I'll just keep this over here.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like you're not hiding in any respect now. You're like, which we should talk now about your business and what you're doing. For so many years also you were um, supporting other people and volunteering in their projects and working for this company and working for that company and learning and growing in so many different ways. And now you're building your own thing and it's already helping so many people. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah.
No, it's so funny because I think like a good friend of both of ours reflected that to me too. He was like, we were eating dinner or we were eating lunch like 3 years ago, and he said, maybe 2 years ago, he said, Pranab, I feel like you often like hide your power level. And I was like, what? And I was like, he's like, he just he gave me some good advice. He was like, your feedback actually not necessarily it wasn't unsolicited. He was just like, yeah, if you're open to feedback, he said, yeah, I just feel like you have a lot there, but it's just not you kind of hide it. You just don't show it. And yeah, I think that's just been the case. I think like in some ways, like the last 3 days, this has been specifically a thing I've been thinking about because I feel like a lot of it comes down to sort of like father issues or sort of masculine wound or sort of a sense of just this big doubt has sort of been a thing that's been there for many years. Yeah, and I think just like learning to trust myself, learning to see that like, oh, I do have good things. I do have things to contribute. I am smart. I am wise. It's not. I don't have to second guess it. Like I think I've often looked for approval for all these things and sort of hope to have sort of an older brother or father figure to be like, yes, you're doing the right thing, keep at it. And then life is sort of just presented like, yeah, you're doing the right thing, keep at it. And I just have learned to trust myself through all of it a lot
Hmm.
more. Um, and now I think I'm at sort of, I still know there's more to go. I still know I'm sort of
Of
hiding and
course.
suppressing a bit, and if I
There's
look back, yeah, exactly.
there's a few people that I think of that come to mind, yourself included, that I really wish I had a better vocabulary for describing this, but um, I'm thinking about video games and like Zencephalon, who's one of these people, will talk about the Bodhisattva cinematic universe.
Mm,
And I really think there's a certain way of seeing that I can really tap into of, oh, we're all almost like Buddha children and we're like learning and growing to become Buddhas. And but then there are ones who are like Buddha teenagers, where it's like, okay, I mean, no one is going to be Siddhartha Gautama. Like Siddhartha Gautama already did that, but there's ones who are like closer or more developmental, and it's like, they're in strong connection with it. Where some of us are like literally homeless or just messing up their lives or on drugs or whatever, and it's like those are Buddha children too, but they have a little ways to go, and we all do, of course. We're all here learning and growing, but there's a few people that I can think of who I've been blessed to meet that are just so um, radiant in this way, and not hiding that from themselves. Like they may be hiding it from the world, which I think is actually prudent in some ways. Like that power level, like when you have a higher power level, it means that you can do damage more easily or like accidentally, and they also kill people in this line of work. So it's prudent in some way to like go slowly and build slowly. But uh, yeah, I feel blessed when I meet someone like that, because in a way I really see it in everyone. I really do, truly. But then the people who it's just like so clear, and so it's like, yeah, you are my senior in these ways, and it's like I think it's prudent to admit that and recognize that and learn what one can from one's seniors so that we can all grow. And of course, in reality, it's multidimensional. There are things that all of us know more or less than the other, but like there's people who are just like far away. It's like, all right, like I'm taking notes, like please, please. So Peace Pilgrim is such a strong example of this. I was never, or Burbea, like what you heard in Burbea. Um, I think this is really stark with. Unfortunately, I think his transmission was sort of curtailed in some ways because of his death, and there's so much that he gave the world and his students that clearly got transmitted, but like the it's just such a loss that he's gone now, is what I'd say. And but like Peace Pilgrim comes to mind of just so like I'm moving my hands for those that are just listening, so polished and clear. And of course she worked on that for literally decades, that you have to build up to that. But there's people like that who just come in, and yeah, of course there's bumps early in life and confusions, but just such immense spiritual clarity already. And yeah, I'm glad that you're in a chapter of hiding that less.
Yeah. Yeah. And even as you say all that, I'm inspired. I'm like, oh my God, I'm still hiding it so much. There's still
Mm-hmm.
so much. I think if I like admitted to myself I wanted to do and could do, and it's just like there's just a lot. There's a lot.
I have a tweet about you from 2023, I think, uh, that I'll have to dig up. But the heart of this isn't. It's just it says, it tags your username and not your name, but it just says Pranab is so special, so special. And I forget what I added, but just like the attitude was like, give him everything he can, like learn everything, like. Um, I feel that so potently, and even this sort of long-winded, eloquent words just feel so paltry to describe what I sense. And there's others I sense. It's not just you. It's like we all are that actually in our nature. We're all here now, but there's people who's like, if you imagine an MMORPG, it's like, okay, here's the level 60 player, here's the level 70 player. Like I'm still on level 20 over here, so I'm taking notes. Like what you say, I will do.
Yeah. Mm, thank you so much. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think a way I sort of thought about it for myself, like when I was like 24, I felt simultaneously 16 and 40 or 35 or
Uh-huh.
something. And at some point it's like it was this weird thing where I like had this like wisdom or like this maybe like I don't know, but something like really old and really young. And it's like off and it's just like the and I felt like over time it's kind of come and now I just feel like 29, you know? I don't know. It's maybe I feel like
You're doing
35.
great as a 29-year-old, so
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're all another way to frame that is in terms of elders of like we're all
Yeah.
becoming elders, and at 70 or 80 we're going to be so OP, and
Hmm.
you'll just say like a brief pithy aphorism that someone goes, whoa, what,
Hmm.
like.
Hmm. Hmm.
But like even I don't know, I'm thinking about Joe Hudson now or Michael Taft or something like that, or my own teacher Soryu. It's like I met Soryu when he was 37, I think, and it's like he was already so he had this quality certainly, but like I just know when he's 80 it's going to be like immense of this, whatever this is, and
Yeah.
that gets polished and refined. Or like Joe Hudson, who is whoever how old now, and it's like, give him another 10, 20, 30 years, and he's
Yeah.
just going to be even more that,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I one thing I want to say is like it feels like I'm not sure how to tie this in, but I remember I had a really challenging experience with some family stuff in 2020 early 2023. And I think like working through it, I distinctly remember so then or maybe a few months before that with some really challenging work stuff. But it was this thing of like Tasshin believes in me. Well, like I had to I have to like I think in times when I'm down, I just have to remember all the people that believe in me
So you
to
were
like
thinking of
carry.
Gurren Lagann as well. I don't know how to pronounce that,
Yes.
but
Yeah. I
which
was.
I've
I
only
think
watched a little bit of. But you were the one that told me about this.
yeah. And that's just like I think it's just like the
Can you
thrust of
explain
sort of
that for
like
someone who doesn't know what it is, like me?
it's so funny because it's one of my favorite animes,
Uh
but
huh.
so yeah, Gurren Lagann. Or actually Gurren Lagann. Yeah, Gurren Lagann, I think. Whatever. But it's just like it's really funny. It's an anime um sort of about masculinity and about growth. But it's like so on one level it's just over the top and it's fun to watch and like the power like in anime there's a thing called power scaling where things get like bigger and bigger and sort of just up the stakes and it's just like ridiculous how the stakes get because it starts like so literally like underneath the ground there's sort of this town like world has been driven under the ground they escape to the surface and the first season was all about sort of getting to the surface and the second season is about like oh they've sort of mastered the planet and like 100 years of technology happened in like 5 years and then they like go to the stars and sort of the galaxies and the universe. It's just crazy power scaling, crazy up leveling, but it's all just about sort of like the main sort of phrase that I think is what you're mentioning is if you can't believe in yourself, believe in the me that believes in you. And I think that's just kind of been the way I've lived a lot of my life. Where I think a lot of times I couldn't really just believe in myself, so I sort of lend on sort of all the people that have just really strongly believed in me for many years. And you're one of them. Yeah, I think I often think about the way that you've sort of the phrase "taken a chance on me." I don't know why that because it's not like you've sort of given me anything like not in like a positional way or something, but it I don't know. There's something about just feeling like you've really just I don't know. It's hard to say, but just sort of gifted your friendship to me in many ways. Yeah, yeah. There's almost I think it comes. There's a hint as I'm saying this now. There's a hint of like, oh, and I don't deserve it. There's part of me that didn't deserve it or something. But that's kind of interesting.
It's hard to think of someone more deserving. So I think really everyone deserves this actually, but we have finite time and energy that we can
Yeah.
give someone, and it's in practice it's hard for me to think of someone more deserving. So
Mm. Thanks.
um, something I learned recently actually. I don't usually rant during the interviews, but here we are. This wand
Yeah.
it casts this spell. I believe in you, and I've really been realizing recently I used to always think about it as like pointing outwards. It's like I believe in you, but it's actually a line pointing to me too. And I think when we cast this spell in the way that I try to embody and live, it really is bidirectional because you have always given me the same energy and then we feed that. And it takes skill and ability to do it in a wholesome way, but it's been clear to me sometime for quite some time how to live this, and it's just a matter of doing it. But it really is bi-directional, and then it really helps everyone else. That's how you get those huge power surges where like everyone levels up because it's just so, which we're in now. Where that's basically what's happening. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's funny. This, I think one of the questions you had,
mhm,
like, what are my current challenges? It just feels so relevant because I think like part of the thing with spiritual practice is, oh, there's something to do, nowhere to go, just unfolding. And I think like I've sort of leaned into like a somewhat wrong view of that recently, but it's hard to tell. That's why it's a wrong view. It's like it kind of feels right, but there's a sense of like not really pushing or growing, or it's missing the sort of like growth aspect of it. And it can kind of, because there can be sort of a sense of dullness or complacency kind of creeping in with that. And I do think I have a bit of that now. In some ways. Like, and I've noticed that. So there's times like I've like popped it. I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? There's, there's limited time here. You know, it's gotta get going. There's things to do, uh, and yeah, it becomes subtler and subtler for me. That sort of like subtle complacency, subtle dullness, because
hmm,
it can seem in the moment so close to just being, just freshness. But for me, the in Ayurveda it's called kapha energy, this sort of thick, slow inertia. And I think working through that and sort of fighting that in a sense, befriending but also fighting, has sort of been the thrust of just like moving towards more action, moving towards being myself, momentum,
hmm,
and doing it without a sort of coercive or forceful or like top down bent, which is
hmm,
not, yeah, I should say coercive. That's different than top down. But yeah, no, it's different. It's challenging. It's interesting.
hmm, hmm. Yeah, there's so much that's at stake in our world right now, and I don't think there's any need to freak out about it or be overly urgent about it. But as an example, I've really, in the last 6, 8, 12 months, started to stand for world peace. Like, I really think that we could end war and violence and hatred in that form in our lifetimes. And uh, I think all of us can do so much more on a collective level,
Mm.
especially as we do this inner work and this inner growth. We become capable of solving problems at the collective scale that are. I think I'm still underestimating how much of a impact I or others could have in our
Mm.
lifetimes. And when we start to taste that, it's for me, it's thrilling. I could see it being overwhelming for people, or scary, or second guessing themselves. But I don't. I love ambition. I'm like, I love. There's been a few times in my life where I feel like my ambition has just surged, where it was like, oh, I thought I was ambitious, and now that was child's play compared to you know um, what's possible now, and what I'm dreaming of now, and what I sense I could do with my life. And I have the sense that's true for all of us. Yeah. I mean, for example, I'm thrilled to see that you're running a business and it's
Mm-hmm.
like going well and helping so many people. I can see the ripple effects. I've heard from many people about your
Mm.
sessions and
Oh, cool.
how powerful they are. And, I've been watching from afar. Um, but same with my project. I'm thrilled at how things are going for me. But I just know if we fast forward 1, 5, 10, 20 years, we're still going to think, wow, those were the rookie years,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
um, like, and I think you are someone that should have that kind of global vision and that global power, uh, because you've cultivated these virtues and because you've done this work on yourself. And it's actually a kind of arrogance to hide from that level of
Mm.
power, you
Mm.
know. So anyway,
Thank you.
uh,
I'm reminded there's the Art of Caution podcast on humility,
hmm,
and it just got me. Even but not even that. It's just I can still feel it. Like there's like a bit of like a pushing in my back that's like no, but I can there's like a tension, and I think wrestling with that tension is sort of
hmm. I think
yeah.
all of that, like you're talking about, is wrong view earlier, like subtle wrong view. But there's always a wisdom in that, and certainly I tend to rush, and other people tend to hesitate, and there's a clarity to being patient and cautious and discerning and prudent about things that I've really had to eat bitter a little bit about learning in different ways, and I'm sure that I'll eat even more bitter.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
the middle way. I hear good things about it.
Yeah, I heard. Who knows a thing or two about that, huh? I don't
So
know me. Just kidding.
tell us about Attentional Copilot and what you're doing in
Yeah,
Attention Copilot.
attention Copilot. Yeah, so yeah, lots of threads I could get into here. I think one, so this is March 2026. So attention Copilot is a thing that I started in July 2025. Um, it's so funny. Oh, there's so many wonderful threads, but basically, it started off as a modality that I guess even now I sort of like say, anyways, that I yeah, a modality that I created, sort of using all the inspirations that I've learned from the last few years to sort of help bring um, emotions and meditation practice to people's work. And there's a bunch of layers I could explain this at, but it sort of started off as just a practice I was doing that I launched on Twitter. Um, I did like 100 sessions in the first 6 weeks doing that, and that was just super fun and validating and just like life changing in many ways. And then fast forward to now, it's a business that has two other coaches that I've trained. I have a co-founder where we're thinking about sort of seeing how big this can get. And it's more around sort of supporting people through deep work in the blocks to deep work. And we actually now have a couple like business clients where we help the founders and some of their team members. We're thinking about maybe raising money for it to really grow. And it's so funny. It's just like, yeah, it might be, all roads lead to B2B SaaS as the take. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yeah, there's honestly kind of like a B2B like true startup angle to this, with what started as like a contemplative modality that is still very much there in the roots of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot that it is, and there's potentially the way that there's like a technology product here where we're sort of like actually using AI in my mind like a legit way to support people through this thing. Um, there's a way this becomes like a world class coaching organization, sort of like to like train and develop sort of the best coaches in the world at sort of blending modalities together with a contemplative like Dharma lens in a way that's actually useful and meets people where they're at. So even if someone doesn't know any of this stuff, they still get the benefit. That's why we have like levels one through. I have like levels 1 through 4, and oftentimes like a level. I think I can talk about that. I think it's really useful and interesting. But yeah, I see it as sort of. I think in a lot of ways as a bridge. I think I like the motif of a bridge in many ways, like bridging worlds together, bridging disciplines together, and yeah, this like helps bridge people's practice into daily life in a way that like where the rubber really meets the road, um, to just help them kind of like do the important things that they avoid day in day out, week over week, and just see how life improves from doing that.
Hmm. I gotta ask about these levels. Tell us
Yeah,
of these levels.
yeah. So you'd love this. I've been wanting to talk to you about this for the last few weeks, but yeah. So it's interesting. So like, so it started as a contemplative thing, right? Where like, hey, I'm bringing in explicitly dharma and emotions, um, into this thing where it's helping people with work, and now we're at a point where we're helping businesses and people who like are venture funded and like they don't know anything about dharma or meditation and emotion stuff. What do they care when they're at their jobs doing this kind of thing? So I came up with this level system to show how it's all very cohesive and it all kind of makes sense. And I really want to keep the essence of what it is, even as we sort of increase the emphasis towards productivity and sort of deep work and more of the functional component of things, to show that there is still this deep transformational quality to it that, depending on how you approach it, can be very different. Um, so that's the framing. What is Attention Copilot? First, I'll go with that before getting to the levels. So it's a modality that sort of blends inner work and outer work. That's one way of framing it. Another is, what does it look like to bring meditation to your work practice, or bring sort of a meditative or contemplative approach to doing things? A lot of people sort of view meditation as this thing where like at a very basic level, oh, I don't have any thoughts and I'm kind of or that sort of a mainstream. Or from a practitioner point of view, I'm like getting reclusive and sort of secluding myself from the world and like working on myself, and work's over there. That's the bad thing. And maybe you kind of swap, but there's not really a connection for a lot of people. Um, but I see it as like this is just a part of right livelihood. Like, what does it mean to have right view while working? What does it mean to have like to bring yourself and your best thing to work, potentially at a job you don't really like, or even work you feel like you have to do but don't want to do, and all this sort of stuff. Like the real sort of like challenges of living daily life in a complex world where we're just doing the best we can. That's the framing. What is the thing? Um, so I maybe actually this isn't required for the levels, but it's essentially sort of like first interactive grounding, and then sort of like a clearing and prioritization, and then a work copilot mode where we're sort of helping people do work. They screen share while talking out loud, and we kind of point out moments they feel stuck, moments they feel sort of blocked. We can you can phrase that through various levels. Like on level one, it's just mindfulness of distraction and just knowing that minute to minute they get distracted and they have impulse to go on Twitter or this or that. The second level is nervous system. Each of those distractions has a sense of feeling in the body. There's a stuckness. There's sort of a collapse of attention. There's sort of a rigidity that happens when that's happening, and you can notice that. You can work with that, and there's an emotion related to that. And even just acknowledging that can be really helpful. Level three is, and if there's a really big block, you can actually really work with it. It's sort of the emotional fluidity level. You can actually move that block. You can do various practices like core transformation, IFS, somatic experiencing. There's various um, things here that you can kind of like work with and move the emotion. You can dialogue with the emotion. You can kind of work with the inner parts in conflict. You can work with various differing values because sometimes when there's a challenge at work, there's sort of different value systems competing. Um, and the fourth level is like the deep contemplative level. And actually doing all that lets you touch into sort of vast open awareness, a sense of sort of deep presence and stillness. And you actually can bring that to the very first level of as you work. You can actually bring this sort of deep contemplative view to any action you do. And there's a kind of a Dzogchen angle to here that you can call it mixing practice, but that's sort of a TLDR of like the levels and how it relates to the sessions. I can go into more detail or explain it more clearly.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Part of the reason I'm interested in is, frankly, when I first saw this, I thought, oh, I'm so glad you're doing this, and it's so important, and people are really going to benefit it. But kind of like those people are going to benefit it because I work. I probably work 10, 12, 14 hours a day every day of the week, and love my work and feel in flow all the time. And I don't really coerce. The only time I have to coerce myself is for like bureaucratic tax type things or like whatever, like strongly aversive tasks that I know I should do but don't really want to. Um, but it's like my work is my spiritual practice, and I was like, oh, I don't really need that. But when you talk about these levels, I'm like, ooh, I could go
Yeah,
even deeper. Ooh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
tell me
yeah,
more.
yeah. So it's so funny because I think I stumbled upon something that can just be so many things to so many different people. So it's
Mm,
hard to talk about because like the framing for you and what makes it interesting, it's going to be far different from the
totally.
CEO of a company I work with, which is far different from
Well,
someone
what
that
are
only
some
has
of the framings or like user stories that you
yeah.
find?
Yeah. So I think like we'll go with some of the common ones, and to be honest, I think your use case would be one of the more fun ones, and
Hmm.
I have a couple things there.
Uh huh.
But yeah, I think like the framing of I have an aversive task and I don't want to do it, but I have to do it, and I just find myself getting distracted a lot. That's I think where it started. So the emphasis was sort of on stuckness to flow, and like, hey, you know that thing you're avoiding that just really sucks? We help you do it and actually find some joy around it. And I've helped a lot of July was like that because of the way I priced and sort of the way I was sort of sourcing on Twitter, it was a lot of personal things. Like I have a backlog. I have like 50 WhatsApp messages that I haven't replied to, or my email inbox I haven't replied to in a long time, or and or like yeah, like taxes, like man. And behind all of that, there are decisions. There are sort of emotions we don't want to feel. There are potential like, and those are the two main things. It's just the decisions to make and emotions we don't want to feel. Within that, there's sort of like competing wants. So instead of I have a frame of instead of shoulds. Like any should is still a want, just with a lot of stuff on top of it. And we just have competing wants. Like that's all we have. Like there's like even modeling resistance, you can just see all as competing wants. Um, so even if you really don't want to do it, what's stopping you from not doing it? Why not? Like what's keeping it sort of there? It's like we see that sort of forceful thing as the thing underneath that. Like what is the joyful? What is the thing that actually truly wants you to do that, even if it's various layers underneath? Um, well, there's a whole thing there, I'm gonna get much better at explaining that. But
You're
yeah,
doing great.
thanks.
It's a hard thing
Um,
to explain, and it will be really obvious in 5 years. So,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it so the stuckness to flow is just like, hey, you have an aversive task, we help you do it. And there, the idea is you have someone to co-regulate you. We kind of help you feel into the emotion. Well, first we kind of drop down from the idea of it to the feeling of it, because we often sort of make these stories that make the thing far worse than they really are. And there's sort of this
It's just
thing
like
that
a
we
tightness in your stomach or like a tension here
yes.
or whatever.
Yes, yes, and it's actually like just and I have a few I've sort of condensed a few somatic moves into a few core things of like just the focusing, sort of finding a handle from gentlest focusing. Oh, it's a tightness in my stomach. That alone, just that alone, for a lot of people is enough. For a lot of people, that is enough, and they can like they feel relief from that. It actually goes from like a an 8 out of 10 to like a 4 out of 10. And they're like, okay, cool, I can actually go and do the thing now. Oftentimes you can then go in and like really explore it and kind of like you can kind of label it of like the intensity of it, and if you're a little too blended you kind of have to like hang out with it a bit more, and kind of like you can kind of just do this thing called distancing where you kind of get closer or away from it and various ways to like interact with it, and that can lead to relief that lets you do the thing. And then as they do the thing, because in our sessions we have someone a coach with them the entire time, sort of like support, just compassionate, deep presence and support, witnessing, and helping people both with on the compassion side of like the emotion side and the metacognition side of like, oftentimes the thing that feels challenging is something's kind of a little bit hard. And it's like, oh, do I do this or that? And once you kind of get it too many layers of abstraction, you get a little overwhelmed, and the overwhelm is emotional pain. You kind of eject off the task. So we help you through the emotional pain of that overwhelm so you can actually keep the meta context in your head and actually have a better plan cognitively. And then you actually stay on the thing the whole time. So in a given 40 minutes of a session, of the work part of the session, for the whole 40 minutes, maybe 38 minutes, you'll be working. Whereas oftentimes on our own, we tend to like 1 or 2 minutes go off on Twitter, 1 or 2 minutes go off doing here. And then there's a switching cost, there's like a return rumination cost, there's all that stuff to get back into it. So we kind of just like skip through all of those little distractions, and within 1 hour, you can get so much done in a way that is ridiculous, and you can feel really good doing it because there's an inherent joy to samadhi, there's an inherent joy to deep work and kind of having one thing in your context the whole time and not switching, and there's an inherent joy to feeling your emotions and to feeling sensations, and doing both plus sort of the regular science of flow like the Mihaly check my height, that guy. There's sort of the joy of just like the meeting yourself just the right level of challenge and all that. But I think the three of those I think together make it so the sessions end up being very enjoyable while you're doing work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Even for someone coming in feeling stuck and like this is the worst thing in the world, I can't possibly do it. That's one very common arc, I would say. I
Hmm.
would say there's two more, so I'd be happy to explain those as well.
Please.
Yeah, so the other two arcs are sort of on challenging complex work on the cognitive side, and the third is on sort of a dharma as work practice, which I don't emphasize. I don't get to like explore as much, so it's fun to talk about. But on the challenging for the second, so this is actually where the bulk of the business is now. So we started off with this like stuckness to flow concept that I think really helps. Um, but there's sort of also like this is the same thing you can do to then go into like performance coaching. Like the same process actually like is also how you go from like pretty good to like really awesome. And you don't even have to feel like you're stuck or not in flow. Like you can be doing great, but then oftentimes there's two aspects here. Are we truly doing the most important work that like really will move the needle? And that might not even be an avoidant thing. It might just be a cognitive challenge of really surfacing it. And two, how can we do that work with like our deepest authenticity, our biggest clarity, like fully bringing ourselves to that work? And the process still applies there too. So I've helped people, like I work with this one CEO of a startup who like every week we meet and we just make sure he's doing the most important thing every week. Like, hey, what's the most important thing? Well, first we get into a meditative space so that he can kind of bring it in outside of the rush of all the sort of daily life stuff. And like, what is the most important thing? Like truly, what is the most important thing this week? What stops us from doing that? And then we kind of like we'll figure out how to scope it down and then do all the things like cognitively involved with that, using sort of the container, the session as a container. And then we just do it together. And then he like in an hour and a half, he will get the most important thing done or make decent progress on it. And he has time shielded away. He's going to be focused on it, and that just changes. That's huge. That can change a business, change an organization. You do that week over week. Um, for some people, that's personal things. Like they're really great at work and they need to like they miss a personal thing that's kind of eating at them, or sort of like the thing that would really move their personal life forward. So that's one. And then on cognitively complex work, sometimes you have, I think, especially people working with like multiple cloud agents or things in parallel, that can be kind of taxing to your internal CPU. So sometimes like even having a thing where, and this is where people do multi-hour sessions. So sometimes I'll work with people for 3 or 4 hours, or we'll work with people for 3 or 4 hours. Um, where for like 3 or 4 hours, imagine doing the most cognitively complex work, but in a way where you have like an easy vent off or an easy way to sort of bring mindfulness or bring sort of spaciousness to it, so you can kind of stay on the task and not feel tired at the end of it and not feel exhausted. And that can be really fun. It's less of a pain point. It's less of a thing that's um, like, oh, I need that. But like when people experience it, they're like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. I didn't realize I could feel this good while doing stuff that this important and this meaningful and this all that, you know? So that's sort of the second arc of things that I would love to do more of, I think, over time. The first one is more of like a pain point. Someone reads that and they're like, oh, I need that. Like I have this problem. I need to fix it. This I think is more on the sort of performance or just like enlivening one's life, like kind of stepping up to the challenge of doing important work and learning to enjoy hard work and the most important thing. This is where I'm at. I'm sort of in this 1 to 2 mode of really kind of moving my life forward, and doing less of one and doing more of two. Like not always needing a pain, not always needing sort of stuckness to motivate me. Just like, can I just enjoy this quality of doing really challenging work in a way that I help other people do?
Fascinating. How have you trained coaches? Like I could have imagined you just developing a really healthy, sustainable. You just Pranab does coaching practice, but you've taken a route of bringing on other people. Tell me about that process.
Yeah. So I've been kind of doing a lot of this honestly comes from inspiration with my co-founder Sam. So Sam Rosen used to run the Waking Up app. He's a dedicated Dharma practitioner himself. He lives in New York, and yeah, we've just been like we met in September or August, I guess, a month after I launched, and I think he's really raised my ambition for this thing, and I think it's made me sort of accelerate sort of the scaling of this in a way that I wouldn't have done as quickly otherwise. So yeah, like I really do think that like where this was born out of, I think like organizations like AOA, Healthy Gamer, there's sort of this now like newfound, um, I think just like understanding of the role that emotions have to play with work and productivity. Procrastination is not a character defect; it's an avoidance of pain. And then there's all this stuff around talking about it and working through it, and that's good, right? On sort of relating to it in more healthy ways. But there's still a lack of like, what do you do about it? How do you what's tractable? What do you do? You know? And I see all these things from like IFS experiential therapies that sort of know how to deal with pain and how to deal with parts of yourself that are sort of in conflict and how to sort of work through it and kind of get to clarity. And of course meditation practice, but there wasn't a way that really integrated it all. And I have my story of how I felt really stuck, and I paid an IFS coach friend of mine that you know as well, Sarah, to sort of help me on Zoom while I was working through a thing. And I thought this was like 2.5 years ago, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. Why don't I wish I could just do this anytime I felt blocked and just like learn the skill myself, and it helps me learn the skill myself. So anyways, coming to now, like I realized what the reality is of, okay, if this, I got advice from people like, hey, if you want this to be your business, like if you want to just do this as your thing, you basically just have to keep raising your rates, if you want the life you want. But then I'm like, well, that's going to exclude a lot of people. Like that doesn't feel great. Like I do think an organization is the best way to sort of spread this idea. And I thought like, well, this can't just be like a me thing. Like I'm not like the best somatic coach ever. I'm pretty good. I found that I have like actually a lot of deep skill with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a meditation teacher, but I actually have a lot of deep skill in guiding people with meditation. Um, and there's a bunch of people who can do those things that probably could learn this. So around October, November, I had talked to a few people, and people really expressed interest in wanting to learn this, and I just sort of just kind of went with it. I like came up with the first batch of training guide. We did a bunch of shared sessions together. I gave a lot of feedback. And my two first coaches are Minnow Park and Leo Stevenson, and and they're great. So Minnow's trained in Alethea. Alethea, I think, has a very similar framing to all this stuff. So I think a lot of Alethea coaches are great here. Leo is newer to coaching, but has a lot of experience with. We met on a Michael Taff retreat about 2 years ago now, year and a half ago. Is also deep into AOA stuff, and just has a good view there. And yeah, I think it just it I've seen like this is a thing that people can learn. And I think learning that was like the first thing to scale. There were a few different metrics of scaling. Like one, does this only work for people who are already sort of somatic or in Twitter spaces and no one care about this? And I learned that sort of with the layer model, no, actually the method can meet people where they're at. You just have to kind of diagnose and sort of slightly alter, but it's the same format can work with a lot of people at different levels. One. Two, can people who are not me do this? Yes, I learned that that's possible. There's a certain sauce that I bring that I think is like especially cool, and I think I'm quite good at this. A curiosity, a willingness to be quiet while someone works, sort of an interest, like a deep care and interest in how someone works. Like a lot of these like multi-hour sessions, I'm just kind of staring at someone's computer for like 2 hours and just looking at their like their body expressions and how stuck they are and sort of I'm just kind of meditating while they're there, and that really helps and it's useful. But so there's some rare skills there, but I think they're scalable. Um, but yeah, I think it totally is a thing that can scale. And now I'm sort of in the process of training like 3 or 4 other coaches potentially to come on, pending sort of more demand. But yeah, I really think that there's a thing here, and I think that will allow it to scale for more people. And I would like to also create a more open source version of this because all of this stuff it's not. There's some stuff that's sort of AC proprietary in some way, like the various moves of how to blend and some of the coach modality stuff. But the fundamental framing, the fundamental like insights are just free, I think. So I'd like to publish more or publish anything really um, of how to do this in an open source way. And even in like the few lightning talks I've given, I've gotten texts from people afterwards like, "Whoa, I've tried this thing and I didn't realize I could do it this way. This is really cool." And there is like less of a likely effect size than working with a coach, but like anyone can. It's not. It's just working with your emotions while you work. You know, like of course you can kind of get assistance and get support, but like it's your body, it's your mind. Anyone can do this. I think in a way that I think can lead to deep benefit.
What would you tell someone who wanted to do this on their own or support a friend in this way?
Yeah. I'm actually talking to yeah, I'm talking to someone to see if we can scale this out as a peer format. But basically, like the idea is the main idea is what breaks us out of flow is a sense of disconnection, and corollary connection can bring us into flow. Like that sounds basic, but it goes really deep. And I think that flow sort of in life can show up as flow in work, but it's like workflow and getting locked in does not require sort of this you know zoned in, excluding everything. There, that is one version of flow. That's totally fine. There's a version of flow. It maps to sort of like object oriented shamatha and like jhana type stuff in some ways, right? Like fixed point, focus, and flow. There's also open, spacious flow. You can kind of have a flow inclusive of emotions and feelings and challenges, and that's the kind of flow that I care about more because I think it's more robust. I think it's more anti-fragile in a lot of ways, even too. You can have challenges, and that actually, if you work with it the right way and alchemize it, it can actually lead to more flow and more inspiration. It's challenging, but doable. Um, and that's all through connection. So the idea is like in coaching sessions, we help people in connection first by having their connection to their coach, the sense of shared vulnerability, shared kindness. We help them connect to their values, and then from that sense of connection, that can lead into a connection with themselves that's more inherent, that can help them sort of connect with the emotions that are challenging, that are stuck, um, to then kind of move into a flow with much more readily, with much more clarity. So as a friend, I think just some of the skills are really just deep listening. So if someone's really stuck, uh, I have this frame of there's sort of like 3 layers of work. There's the work layer, which we all think about. If we're stuck and just sort of like butting our heads or distracting a lot, it's actually much better to drop down at the emotions layer. And that's sort of like, what are our competing wants? What are the emotions? What's the physiology? What are the sensations that we're feeling? What are the things that we're pushing away against? And as a friend, you can actually just help someone drop down into that and just sort of like, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling? If you close your eyes, what do you notice? That's maybe if you have more coach skill, but even just saying like, what's what's going on? What's bothering you? And just kind of like having people just vulnerably open and just being connection to themselves, helping them do that, huge. There's a layer above on sort of strategy and metacognition of like, hey, what's your goal? Like, what would success be like for this task for you? What do you care? What do you want to happen here? What would outrageous success be? And then there's a bunch of other questions you could ask strategically around like what's a near enemy, like what's almost success but not success, and just kind of helping them think of the vision of like the scoping of like what really is there, right? And you can ask this for yourself. You can have an LLM ask this for you. From there, what are next actions? What are a few of the possible steps? What might be, just like this? That's like typical productivity stuff, right? But the key is doing that. Like you can try doing that, but if that's challenging, just dropping down to the emotions and then just like flowing between all three periodically throughout, I think is sort of the key to just staying sort of in a sort of like um, in a sort of like spacious, useful flow for like many hours. I think.
Mm-hmm. What makes you trust someone to be one of your employees and be a coach in this way? What makes you called to work with someone and feel like, yeah, this is a good fit versus not a good fit?
Hmm. Yep. So one clarification is currently no one is an employee except for me.
I see.
So we have independent contractors.
Sure.
But inshallah, maybe at some point the organization will
Uh-huh.
be big enough to sustain that. But yeah, I think there's some of the basic but like truly fundamental stuff that's important. Of just integrity, care. Do they bring a presence to them? Do they care about people? Are they curious about people? Um, can they listen? All that stuff that I think is um, maybe to us sort of like maybe I should say speak for me. Like it almost feels trivial at this point of just like of course, but it's really rare. These are rare skills in society and across lots of people. And even amongst coaches and therapists, like not all coaches and therapists are sort of like habitually ready for deep listening and care and compassion. So that's one whole thing. On the intellectual side, I think a framework that sort of allows a curiosity and like a desire to learn about a meta approach to things, sort of not being kind of mired in like this is the one modality that I care about, whether it's IFS or CBT or something, but like an openness to like various modalities and like a meta framework, and like seeing how like oh you can do this thing and it moves to this thing and there's a layer model and actually oh we can meet people where they're at and they're not married to needing to do work at a certain level. So I think it's a true gift to allow for someone to like, if they just want to do deep work, we help them do deep work. If someone really wants to explore their relationship to work and their emotions around work, we can do that too. Um, but it really is sort of this like this true sort of like humility at just helping meet someone where they're at and a capacity to be able to meet them at various levels of where they're at. Um, I over time, I really like this idea of a meta framework. So I think Alethea has a good meta framework. Um, there's a person I'm taking her course, Julianne Taylor Shore, who has a STARE framework. So STARE is sort of it's a framework to kind of use different modalities together with an overarching thing with memory consolidation as the ethos. Um, a lot of the sessions I have used the so Michael Taft's stack model of experience, which is very similar to Alethea in certain ways. They both come from Mahamudra. But these are all frameworks for sort of like levels of depth of progress and depth of sort of presence. Um, and yeah, I think a coach ideally is willing to be trained in that. Um, it's funny because at some level, in some ways, like, and this is to like have a true like level 1 through 4 coach. Um, in some ways, I think like this is not required in some sense for many clients. And I can see in the future sort of training people who are, you know, not necessarily as contemplative or don't have as much depth in all these areas, and still have be able to run very useful sessions. But I sort of have this like view of like, oh, there again in 5 years there are totally going to be other businesses that do this, sort of like help people while they work. But I don't think any or very I can't imagine any also having the sauce of like all four levels of
Mm.
like, and I have this whole thing, I kind of know like you can't really do level 1 really well without level 2. You can't do level 2 truly well without level 3. You can't do level 3 truly well without level 4 understanding. So in that way, it's like very robust, I think, that I'm excited for.
Hmm. How have you watched yourself grow as a leader during this time?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think leadership. I think the big one is sort of noticing. Maybe it's the big one because I think I've been noticing the last couple of weeks. I sort of have an anti-authority streak, and a very like, oh, do what you want, I trust you, which I think is great because I don't micromanage, and I'm like, oh, I don't give enough structure, and I think that's just one example of sort of like any organization is downstream of the founder's mentality, and the founders or co-founders' psyche, and any of this sort of sort of neuroses or random patterns that I have will show up in the organization. And that's how it always is and always will be for every organization. So it's totally fine. It's not some moral failing. But I'm just seeing all the ways in which, like, yes. So I've worked with so many founders in the last 5 or 6 years with my work doing growth marketing. And I had all my, like my armchair critiques of, oh, this person just did this, or if this person just did that. And now I'm seeing, like, man, being a founder is really hard. It's just like just leading an organization is really hard. And I have much more empathy to sort of the past people I've worked with. They're just doing their best. And I almost wish I spoke up more because I had a lot to say. I had a lot of things that probably could have had more value earlier on. And I wish I didn't keep it to myself so much for so much of it. Because it's always a gift when someone points stuff out for me. I'm just trying my best. I'm not always my wisest self all the time, but I'm trying to be. And yeah, I think just seeing how much like business truly can be and is a spiritual practice if you let it. Um, and yeah, and I think just the balance of yeah, just sort of having right view with all this stuff. Like I think it's like the wisdom and compassion. Like there's kind of like sort of yoking the sort of the intellectual or sort of philosophical side of things with like doing. I'm like, hey, are we getting things done? Like, are we able to make payroll? Like, there's like true physical constraints of like, hey, in 3 months, if like I'm not making more money, like the coaches will probably leave because they're not getting a full-time thing from this. And there's all that sort of with the organization that it makes it fun. Like, it does feel important. I think for a long time I felt like I wasn't really doing important work, and this feels pretty important. This is like the
Mm-hmm.
most important it's going to be for me for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's been cool.
Hmm. If you had to sum that up, is there like one or two or three virtues you feel like you've cultivated as a leader? If business really is a spiritual practice for you, like
Mhm.
what has been cultivated?
Yeah, I think courage is the big one of just um I think the biggest thing that's sort of in my life and in the business is do the thing that you're avoiding. Your
Mm.
life will just get better if you do the thing that you're avoiding.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is the clarity of finding the thing that you're avoiding because sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to know. And that's the nature of avoidance. Sometimes you don't know you're avoiding that you're avoiding something, and it's just this like it's just so interesting. There's some good tweets I could point to about this, but like I think the nature of avoidance and like understanding avoidance is just it's so fascinating to me. And I think in some ways like I like the entirety of the spiritual path is about confronting avoidance. I think that's actually that can be true. That can be in and of itself the whole thing. Um, and just so that's one frame that like it really has been just like what am I doing? What am I avoiding? What am I avoiding? Um, what are ways that I'm subtly sort of doing what's more fun than what's important? What are ways that I'm doing what doesn't really matter? And then noticing how like 2 weeks or 3 weeks of that don't feel that great, and just really integrating that in. Um,
Whoa, that line hit me. Of what am I doing that's more fun than important? Like, oh man, I've been doing fun for years, and I don't think what I'm doing is unimportant, but I'm gonna have to sit with that line.
yeah, yeah, it's a recent revelation for me, where I think yeah, it's sort of in the mode of, oh, just kind of. I mean, we've been in this mode of building the business in sort of like a more bottoms up, like we'll see what's happening, what's emergent, and which I think is
Mm-hmm.
great. I love that generally, and it sort of led to this near enemy that I was doing of just like kind of just doing what was more fun but not
Mm-hmm.
truly meaningful. And I really felt the pain of that a couple weeks ago, where I just like it just hit me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm wasting so much time by doing this, and that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel good at all. So I mean, it all works out, right? It gets reintegrated in, and it's sort of there's a new definition of fun, a new definition of important, but yeah, just kind of just really being honest. Like, honesty, I think, is a huge part of this too. Being honest with myself of where are things going, how do I feel, what needs to be said, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, you very kindly answered so many of my questions. Is there anything you'd like to talk more about or dive more deeply into?
So I'd love to chat about the third archetype of sessions that I think you'd find interesting
Mm.
and fun.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, like, and this is sort of like off the deep. This is beyond my pay grade, but I think I could talk about it. It's
Mm.
basically like I
There
think
are
like
things that are above your pay grade, Pranab.
there are many,
What?
many, many things
Don't hold yourself back, brother.
for sure, for sure.
Okay,
So
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 tell me.
yeah. So I think like so the two main influences of this whole modality, right? One was sort of that session I had with Sarah, or my IFS coach friend, uh, to do basically doing parts work while working, and that was I think fall of 2024, something like that. But then in no, yeah, 2023, fall 2023, yeah. And then December 2024, I was on retreat with Michael Taft, and it was a spacious awareness retreat of just sort of like fall back into spaciousness and just rest. And it was very, like Mahamudra, Dzogchen, Hindu Shiva Tantra, all the keywords, sort of mode of just like rest and recognize your true nature kind of thing. And yeah, I was having a great retreat. Like it was really things were really flowing and going. And I was just in this sort of like really like nice mode. And I thought, hey, what if I open my laptop? Because I remember work wise there was some stuff I kind of was pushing away. And I thought, like, what if I just do that now? And I was like, oh, I can kind of keep because the previous retreat I was sort of playing with like being on Twitter while on retreat and actually like truly like being deeply aware of when Twitter when the timeline would grip myself and like sort of take me into a more contracted state of being and really playing with that in between of playing with spacious awareness, the contraction, knowing sort of the types of content, knowing the feeling of when it would kind of go in too much and I would like relax back, go in too much, relax back, and that whole kind of thing. So that was with social media. So a year later, I was doing it with work, and I had some emails I wanted to write that were challenging and some other things. And I noticed I can actually stay in sort of in this way of working the view. And there's too much to unpack there of what that means, but if you know, you know. But sort of the view of so from some or the close approximation to the view from Dzogchen. Um, and I know I realized I could kind of titrate it and kind of get closer to it and kind of do it. And it actually led to a lot of interesting creativity and work and I actually could be like efficient while doing it too. Um, and I realized in these sessions like that can happen if you can kind of drop someone into a deep if you can help someone drop into their deepest sense of view, deepest sense of practice, their deepest sense of being, like oftentimes work sort of like pulls us out of it, or just like you get back into like being a separate sense of self in your head. But really, it's just about returning. And there's nothing like technically stopping us from sort of being in that mode while also sort of being and doing mode. Um, and I learned that like there are traditions that sort of talk about this, not necessarily and I think laptop work is especially, and I think Zen talks about this clearly, right? Like while you're doing the dishes, while you're doing physical tasks, can you sort of have practice going on? And that can be at the level of mindfulness all the way down to the level of right, like true right view. But knowledge work seems like this exception because it's like playing with concepts and thinking in a way that seems like, well, you couldn't possibly do that while thinking, right? And you actually can. You actually can. It takes really hard practice in a way that I often don't embody. But I've worked with people that can do this, and you actually can just like be in this deeply embodied sort of spacious view while thinking and doing stuff and sort of playing with concepts and noticing the flow of thought and treating like thought as another sense gate, and actually sort of like not getting reified and gripped back into a separate sense of self while working. Um, and I think that's going to be really cool. And I really want to do sort of like at some point like a meditation retreat with work that I think for people sort of in the earlier side of this and the later side of this will all get benefit. But I think it can be really profound experience.
Hmm. I noticed that this is really having a impact on me and transmitting something to me. I feel like there's little experiments I've done before, but that I feel like permission to try right now, and it's like, oh, that's that's good. I like that. I'll do more of that. Thank you, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Um, it must be so interesting to work now on so many levels, like not just the oh I'm working on interesting things level, but the like phenomenological perceptual level.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. This has really been a boon for my practice because in some ways
Mm-hmm.
to do what I do, I have to sort of really be quite dropped in or sort of in
Mm-hmm.
meditative mode. Um, and that's led to some like weird shit happening I think, like October, November of just like, whoa, this is weird. Because it's just sort of like contacting emptiness a good bit of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in some ways, I think I sort of lost, not lost, but I've sort of ignored, I think, my true practice. Like I haven't been sitting as much as I want to. I haven't
Mm.
been on retreat in a while. So I'm excited to kind of consciously emphasize that. the next
Hmm.
few weeks, next few months.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Hmm.
I do have a question for you.
Hmm.
So um somewhat unrelated but related. I've noticed that like I think for a lot of people, I'll just sort of say it, maybe the frame can be adjusted or the assumptions there can be poked. But I think that when it comes, I think there's a lot of people that are sort of, good at power, bad at love, or sort of maybe like they have really developed power in their lives, developed a sense of um, mastery of work and career and all these sorts of things, but have sort of underdeveloped in the love department and the sort of compassion to themselves and the emotions and that sort of thing. And it seems like there's a lot of practices around sort of supporting compassion and love, metta, IFS, attachment theory, and maybe and it just feels it's funny. In the last few days, I was like, "Oh, there's so many. It's so abundant." At the same time, it is scarce another way of not realizing how important it is. So there's that work to be done. But there's a lot of like things one can do to sort of deepen into love. Like there's very practical things that you can do within a week to like deepen your love. I think it feels like there's a dearth or a lack of those same resources or same tractable things for power. It seems like there's actually um, a lot of there aren't as many containers or practices. And I think you're building. I know that you're do, with give your gift and other things like sort of ways to sort of help someone grow into their power and grow the capacity for power and work and action. Um, I'm sort of mapping these to like mother wounds and father wounds
Hmm.
roughly.
Hmm.
But I'm kind of curious your take on that. Like, so my sort of assertion is that it feels like we're sort of underdeveloped in sort of ways to grow in power, caveat, in ways that feel grounded and also grounded in love.
Hmm.
But there are ways to grow in love that are maybe more grounded in power. Um, People in the past would maybe go to the military, or you could join a boot camp. And I think there are some like coding boot camps, like Andrew's, for example, Andrew and Priya's in New York, that I think it's really powerful here. Um, but yeah, just a sense of curious your take on that.
Um, why is there a dearth of resources of power, or like what would I do to help someone come into right
Or
relationship with power?
curious if you agree with the framing, um, or sort of like if that framing makes sense to you. And if we could explore what are, yeah, then that second thing you said, what are ways we could, that people could grow in their power
Hmm.
from your point of view?
The frame surprises me because I think I'm used to thinking that the world is bottlenecked on wisdom and love and not on power. Um, um, but there's also really clear ways to do both, and I don't think I'm confused about how to help people, how I at least can help people cultivate love or power. If anything, I feel my own lack of wisdom and my own inability to help people with wisdom. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely things I would recommend to someone who wanted to come into right relationship with power. Um, these days, I really love the book Unbound. I think that's a great book to read. Um, it's written for women, but I think even men can. I mean, I loved reading it, and I know other men that have loved reading it. Um, I think one of the big exercises that we've built as a foundation in the empowerment department is the values exercise. We have an app now for this, values.serviceguild.fun.
Oh, cool. Let me write this down.
Um,
Or I can, yeah, I got it saved.
a couple people helped us develop that in Teapot, and it's just a golden age for developing things like this. This would have taken $10,000-$20,000 even a couple years ago. Um, and that exercise changed my life. I really recommend it. I think also just wrestling with whether you believe in something like a life purpose or a vow or a calling. I really believe in that, and we believe in that at the empowerment department. But even if you don't believe in it, just like coming to terms with that, like why don't you believe that? Is there a life purpose? Is there not? What even would that mean? And thinking about that, I think can be helpful. And then practically, what I do, like those are sort of like view, of like seeing power. Not, and I like the metaphor of a knife, where a knife is sharp. You can cut yourself. You can hurt someone. you could really do real damage. People do real damage with knives, and yet the moral of that is not never use knives ever under any circumstances. It's like, get good, learn how to use knives well, and don't hurt yourself, don't hurt other people. If you do hurt yourself, if you do hurt other people, learn from that. Like, you will cut yourself sometimes, but like, try not to, and learn and grow when you do. It's not avoid knives at all costs. And that's how one, I think, should view power of, yes, it is powerful, it can harm, but learn to wield it well instead of avoiding it. Or even worse, the thing that people actually do isn't just like avoid it at all costs. It's like lie to themselves about whether they do have it at all. That's what a lot of people are doing. And you just do have power. Everyone has power. There's so much victim mindset and like, oh, I'm powerless and other people are using power on me. And that's delusion. You just do have power. We all have so much more power than we are willing to sit with. So there's the view side of it. And then practically, the two things I really like to move people through. We have this whole quest map that's really powerful that Sylvia illustrated for us. But the two things I would say broadly, once you've done that kind of view work, are productivity. Doing the digital productivity coach is what I recommend to people, and we really have this curriculum and of like, do this, then this, then this. And then if you graduate from the productivity, which I hope people do, that's almost boring to me at this point. It's like, you need this is the fundamentals, but like, finish it in 2 or 3 or 6 months or whatever. Then strategy, and strategy is about what you can do when you want to coordinate with other people, and how you have long-term visions and long-term goals that are beyond just yourself. And Peace Pilgrim talks about this. She talks about problems, and she says that problems are opportunities that help us learn lessons in life, and that once we kind of finish our own personal problems, it's necessary that we do our part with collective problems, and that it's not possible to be truly happy unless you're doing your part to solve collective problems. Mm-hmm. But you have to start with your own problems. And she was very clear, peace starts within, and you have to have inner peace before things like world peace, which she really cared about, even make any sense. It's not the other way around. Although I would guess that they're mutually supportive, but that's neither here nor there. But strategy, productivity first, then strategy. Strategy doesn't really make any sense until you have the view and the tools and the fundamentals, but it really starts to make sense as soon as you hit that level. You're just like, no, I have this vision I want to do, and I can't do it alone, and I need people to do it with, and I need to coordinate with other organizations, and I need to think cognitively about this in a skillful way. The strategy tools that I've recommended to people are the ones that I've found being most useful. Actually, one of the things I'm most excited about, this is total tangent, but I got obsessed with military strategy for a few years back in the day, and there's a process that I learned about that was an outgrowth of the theory of constraints from Goldratt called the logical thinking processes. And there's a couple of books by this gentleman, William Detmer, that really explain this process. And I have an article about it that I wrote for Tiago a long time ago called The Punk Strategy Guide to Logical Thinking Processes. And my whole point there was, there are these 7 tools that you can do, and they're kind of like diagramming thinking tools. Originally, they were taught that you should do them in sequence, and you should do all 7 or whatever it is. But I was like, hey, you can actually do them as need be and just do one off. And I did that for many years. I've used them extensively. But this year, I was like, no, I really need to do all 7 in a row for myself personally and for the guild. And I even want to do it at higher levels for like Teapot and the world and our solar system. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I have to put my own oxygen mask on first. But that kind of strategic thinking, I think it's not obvious to people from the outside. Like, it's really easy for these ideas to seem like just ideas or just concepts or like interesting thinking. But if you really download these models and apply them to things you care about, you make different choices and take different actions, and you steer towards different outcomes. And if you do that iteratively over time, then everything changes. And so I really hope that my life will prove, and really the Service Guild will prove, that strategic thinking has real impacts. It's not just like cute ideas or something. Like, it really matters. And the Service Guild is built on the theory of constraints. It's built on the logical thinking process. It's built on Cynefin. It's built on other things I can't even remember right now because they're just so baked in. But like really using those, especially the theory of constraints, how do we maximize the impact we can have and the rate that we have that impact and the degree of qualitative fun we have doing that. Not just, I mean, both impact, I think, and fun are qualitative metrics rather than purely quantitative, or arguably impact is a combination quantitative, qualitative, but whereas rate is purely quantitative. So I think this is also in a blind spot of our world of especially like the EA. I really resonate with the EA thinking. I've talked about this before, but they're so fixed on quantitative reasoning and they don't know how to do qualitative reasoning. And so, or at least your average EA that you would find on a Bay Area sidewalk. But I have really lived how to do qualitative reasoning and valuing, kind of in the same way, really in a kind of EA-shaped way, but it's about qualitative thing. And the best is to do both. And it's foolish to, yeah.
What's the example of the more qualitative reasoning for this? I think quantitative makes total sense, but
Yeah. Well, for example, you went to the first little loving kindness, private loving kindness retreat that we did in 2022. And then you came back to the second one in 2023. And I still think that those retreats that you went to are the highest impact, most benefit project that the Service Guild has done to date, which I think you have direct access to. You've told me privately before about how much those have impacted you and changed the course of your life. Yeah. And there were only 7 people, myself and Zev included, at the first one. So that's kind of a low number, but huge impact on those people's lives. And then that ripples outwards where you're literally living your life differently.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Like the one in 2023 really did change the way I related to
the first or the second one?
The second one.
The second one, wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the first one for sure. Like that relates to sort of the thing I shared earlier on. But the second one, I don't know if I would have done the same choices I would have. I don't know if I would have done the choices I made with my family stuff without that retreat.
Right.
Which is,
and you had COVID for most of that, yeah?
Yeah. No, that was the craziest retreat where I had COVID for basically the entire thing. And that's when a lot of the method sort of became a thing as well, because I was like feeling really bad. I was in a lot of stress career wise. I felt like I was potentially going to ruin my family's financial well-being and other things. I just had a lot of stress. And gave me a lot of deep rest. And then some, like, a lot of crazy stuff emerged from that, and it's a lot of relief and release. And the month after, like, allowed me to, like, if it wasn't for that retreat, the month after I probably wouldn't have gotten the jobs at Journey and Odyssey that I did, because I had to really show up in a sprint for that, and then all the stuff with the family that happened afterwards too. Well, that was. It was the first retreat. So it was the first retreat that led the family. Yeah. I'm getting the years mixed up, but yeah. The second retreat too was also deeply impactful. Yeah.
I think we all have these moments in our lives where we look back and, asking about your life story or journaling or having a conversation or kind of opportunities to do that, where you look back and like, oh, that person really impacted me, or reading that book really impacted me, or going to that place, or doing this project, or whatever it is. And we know that in ourselves almost inarguably, right? Like, in your heart, like I'm just, feeling it. What impact that had on you, and you can't prove that. You can't explain it. You can't do an experiment. There's no measure of it.
There's no counterfactual.
There's no blind experiment, but it, and it's inarguable. And like, if you really feel that, like, I would fight someone if they tried to tell me something didn't impact me. It's like, no, like, I am the expert on this, and this is true, and don't tell me it's not. And that's the kind of thing that I live for, is having benefits and impacts in that way. And it's prudent to add in quantitative reasoning. Like, for example, I pay attention. I think this podcast, right? Having a heartfelt, real conversation about real lives and these ideas that really matter. Someone listening to this, I know I'm impacted by this conversation. I said this phrase that you said earlier that really impacted me. There's other things that are stirring, but like, someone listening even 10 years from now could be impacted by this. And then quantitatively, I can think, well, for a lot of my pilgrimage, I was averaging, say, 1 a month of these. And now I'm able to do 2 or 3 if I'm settled down. And like, and it's prudent to pay attention to the quantitative reasoning, but I'm almost bored by it. It's like
Mm.
the thing I love is this qualitative benefit, and also fun. The other big qualitative measurement is fun. Is like, do I enjoy this? Like, clearly I think we're both enjoying this conversation, and that's again a subjective, direct phenomenological experience of like, you are the expert on whether you're enjoying this, I'm the expert on whether I'm enjoying this, and there's no, I know, probably there's physiological correlates to that,
Yeah,
but
right. HRV and
yeah, which is
yeah, yeah,
fine. I mean, I'd be interested in that, but like at the end of the day, it's like I found that fun or I didn't.
yeah.
And paradoxically, admitting that you didn't find something fun is part of the critical path to actually finding things that are fun.
Mhm.
So we have to do that cyclically at the Service Guild all the time. Be like, actually, that wasn't fun. We thought it would be, but it wasn't fun. But then you learn and you're like, okay, well, what would be? Let's try something new. And so combining that qualitative reasoning or prioritization with the quantitative reasoning that's so widespread, I think is just such a powerful combination that kind of shows that's like, without that, that's why you have the burnout in the EA, or all that stuff that the problems they run into, and
Yep.
I think
And
it's
I
a
think
medicine for that.
I'm starting to see, I think, in our communities, the sort of the impetus for the power thing was,
Hmm.
you can kind of, I'm noticing you can kind of be overly, not overly in the qualitative. It's not about overly qualitative. You can kind of be missing the quantitative a bit. Or you can
Hmm.
kind of be missing the
Totally. This was
actual
me for
power
a
of it.
while. One of my
Yeah,
goals last year was
yeah,
to like get some quantitative stuff on the measure, like have some spreadsheets, and I got
yeah.
really interested in there's a framework that Cedric Chin has been talking
Mm.
about, a common cog that I got really interested in. That in retrospect, I think I was kind of overkill for me, but I'm glad I know it now because at some point it won't be.
Mm.
I forget what that's
Yeah.
called now, but it was a certain way
Okay.
of measuring.
Yeah, 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 I
Yeah,
know what you
this
mean. I
thing,
was, yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
thing,
yeah. Yeah, I know the
Yeah,
thing. I forgot what it's called too, but it's
yeah.
like
I'm
a
kicking
way to measure
myself that I don't
variance
remember,
over
but
time or change over time.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very powerful. And yeah, so that's a failure mode of this, is like, yeah, and in fact that's why your phrase hit me so much, of like, oh, are you just doing what's fun and not what's important? And I
Mhm.
think in a lot of ways the quantitative stuff can show what's important and
Mhm.
what's
Mhm.
really measurable. And also just causal reasoning, that's what I've been doing recently, is
Mhm.
like, what leads to what, and what are the root causes, and what are interventions that would solve those root cause problems, and
Mhm.
not just solving the symptoms or the superficial surface things, but
Mhm.
solving the root causes.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's funny because I think like I can have a tendency, and I think I'm just one example of a lot of this stuff. When you meditate a lot, too much, or do, I shouldn't say too much. When you're kind of deep in meditation world or deep in emotions world, if you're deep in doing like AOA programs or a lot of healing stuff, you can kind of forget to improve your thinking as like a
Mm-hmm.
capacity and as a sort of skill. And I know I've noticed this myself, where I do so much like space holding work and all this kind of stuff. Building the business has been fun and showing me like, oh, I miss doing the analytical, rigorous sort of like I can really like grow that as a muscle of sort of strategy, thinking deeply for like 2 or 3 hours on my own of what is the goal of this business versus these short chunks. Like I'm noticing all these ways. It's like cross training. Like I'm actually really good at the space holding beingness thing now, and I'm like, oh, I really want to kind of get better at quantitative tracking things, the power building, and all that sort of stuff.
I'm reminded that back in the day, in 2018 or so, my big thing at the time was mind body attention. That was what I was
Mm.
so excited about, was like mutually supportive feedback loops between intellectual endeavors, embodiment practices, and contemplative practice. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, oh, I need to return to that. Like, I need all three of those. And I did do movement practices pretty intensely the last couple of years, but um, just consciously having that frame and having them be mutually supportive. So,
I
yeah.
like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've been wanting to. I would love to do a session with and for you at some point because I think
Mm.
you'd have some great insight
I
into
have
it.
a task to sign up, so
Yes.
I'll be signing up.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, we'll chat about that. But then yeah, I think yeah, you're one of the I shouldn't say one of the few, but you are of the people that come to mind immediately when I think of what I'm doing as just
Mm.
as like you get it and also
Mhm.
just like care about things in similar ways and
Definitely.
it'll be cool.
Definitely. I
Yeah.
think it's such a gift to the world. I think that what you're doing actually is, in my view, in the shadow of the last 30 years of work culture and really a medicine for that and diving into that, and in a lot of ways in the shadow also of spiritual practice.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I really admire, now that I think about it, the line I hear you taking about the way of relating to commerce, because I get a little bit particular and precious, probably to a fault, about how Dharma is sold, or
Hmm.
whether it's sold and in what way. And there are certain companies that I won't name that I don't really admire how they do this. And uh, I like the stance you're taking, because individual time and energy of coaches who are supporting in this way really should be compensated amply. And then I love that you're talking about open sourcing this, and you're speaking so freely about how people can do this, and knowing that it comes from this rich tradition that
Hmm. Hmm.
is really just directly benefits us all. It's You're
Yeah.
kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you restrict
Yeah.
Dharma practice.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I have a pretty deep view of now having worked for Journey.
Mm-hmm.
So Odyssey was a psilocybin therapy company.
Mm.
I have close interactions with AOA. So these are all sort of companies in the sort of contemplative e space in some way. And I think through all that, I have my own view, and it's challenging to run a company in those spaces because it's
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, like there's a lot of it's like you got to charge to pay people well, you got to charge, and it's there's all this stuff, right? Um, and I think that my view on this is I think a way to solve a lot of I think all these companies are doing wonderful work. And I think a few of the values that I want to emphasize in how I build attention Copilot, in addition, is interoperability. So,
Mm.
like, not having this thing of we are the one practice, then we are the place to go if you need to do this. Sort of like, hey, and I think interoperability and open source. Those are like sort of
Mm.
the two things that I think emphasizing those in addition to like, hey, we're building the Tesla for this kind of thing. Like we are really expensive and we do that because we pay our people really well. And you can get it for free here.
Mm-hmm.
Or get some version for
Totally.
free here. And to be honest, right now we're not living up to that because I don't have much out there for free. But I think I'm okay with that for
Well, and
now.
this podcast is changing that, so
Right,
it's
right,
great.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, totally. And I
Um,
think there's a power aspect to it too, where it's like, or I should say, an agency aspect or like a capacity, like getting better at like taking these podcasts and turning them into more resources and various mediums and publishing
mhm.
it, and figuring out how to, there's all that. But that's sort of my take. I think like I've come around like money stuff for this whole thing has been huge for me. Of like,
Mhm.
I went from I was like, what should my rate be? And I was charging like $60, and then I went up to 120, and then went up to 180, and now I'm like charging even more than that. And I'm like, is
Mhm.
that okay to charge? Was that right? And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, it was actually really helpful to have a team because I'm like, well, hey, I need to spend this many hours like to help support my team on the business side.
Mhm.
We also need like they're not making enough sessions. I need to keep doing sessions. So what's the rate that allow me to like pay
Totally.
myself? And
Totally.
so it's like it's been really
I feel
good.
great about that side of it for what's worth. And
Yeah.
I think that's entirely reasonable. It's the like desire to open source what's working,
Yeah. And
and spread that I really admire.
thank you. And I think even within myself, because I think I have a lot of self-criticism or
Mm-hmm.
criticism, I should say, of tactics or like not
Mm-hmm.
wanting to like be a bad person or this or that.
Mm.
And I think feeling into like really wrestling with this stuff and just like letting it really simmer and what would what is something that I could be proud of and fully
Mm-hmm.
stand by. And yeah, it's not a problem. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling good about the way I'm approaching
Mm.
it so far.
I should say, for my own integrity, that it seems to me I very lightly criticized and allude a specific company there, but I think this is very much in my own shadow, as how to work with money, and arguably really going back to Peace Pilgrim, who both inspires me in this, and I think she could have done a lot more benefit if she had leaned into this sort of thing. And it's not, as you say, it's not an easy problem to solve. So while it's easy to be an armchair critic and be like, I don't really approve of this particular choice that you're making. I still think they're doing good work and that it's of net benefit. And I criticize in solidarity and
Hmm.
humility rather than,
Yeah. Yeah.
authority.
Same. I think like I've in a lot of ways I've sort of been it's been really easy for me to like pick apart and critique things over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm switching more to as I've been doing more and more building, I'm like I still have that view and it makes me a better
Mm-hmm.
builder, but I'm like oh man, it's hard
Hmm.
to do anything, and it's like that doesn't give you a free pass. That doesn't mean anything
Hmm.
you do is justified, but
Hmm.
I think I have more for myself. Just like yeah, it's hard to do. Humility and
Hmm.
grounding or understanding of
Ain't that the Lord's truth?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, well, I so
yeah.
appreciate your time and your wholeheartedness. I think you really brought yourself so fully to this, and you're bringing yourself so fully to your work. And I think it's such a gift, and I'm grateful to learn of it now. And I feel very excited both for this chapter for you and for your company, but also I really sense, and I hope you, I think this will happen anyway, but I hope you stay connected to the kind of person that you could become over the years. I see
Mm,
you as so well positioned to uh, exceed even your own dreams and imaginations of the kind of benefit you could have with your life. And um, I'm thinking of the prophecy before the Buddha was born. Do you know about this?
no.
A fortune teller of some kind told the Buddha's father, who was a king, of course, that his son would either be a great king or a great holy man. And his father really wanted him to become a king. And so that was why Siddhartha's childhood was the way it was, where he was sort of isolated from the world and had everything he could possibly want. And paradoxically, that's what led him to become a holy man instead. And I often wonder about the alternate timeline where his father had really wanted him to become a holy man and then
He was a king.
through inversion became a king. And I think I see you as someone who is well positioned to have the best of both worlds in this lifetime. And
Thank
um,
you.
the world really needs people like that, and it needs all of us. So that the words I'm saying to you are true for all of us, I think, in a certain way. But I'm excited about that even larger arc than your business right now, which I am truly excited and in support of. I'm just like, oh man, I can't wait for the episode 5, 10, 20 years from now where we circle back. So
Yeah, me too.
yeah, yeah, it's great. Well, thank you, Pranab.
Thank you, Tasshin.